People get wrapped up in clickbait and how many people are viewing their podcasts. Even the most influential people judge themselves based on this new particular technology. When you're at peace with yourself, you don't need that. Nothing I say today, said yesterday, or will say the day before will change the trajectory of America. Only facts can. Not what party you belong to, who you take money from, or what party you detest. Outside of social media and network television is a whole group of people. 340 million Americans who are tuned in, tuned out, or not considering what you say at all. 340 million Americans are Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and now Socialists. 340 million Americans are in nursing homes, veterans homes, $1 million homes, their children's homes. They are millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zers, and baby boomers. 340 million Americans can decide tomorrow the outcome of what happens to our nation. And despite what you say on your podcast, they are. Some of them listen to MSNBC and CNN. Some of them might listen to you. Most of them don't listen to me. And the majority of them, black, white, and Latino, where I live, have completely tuned out. This is the Woke Socialist Podcast. Please like and subscribe to this video, or don't. However, there are some very important messages and predictions in what I'm about to say. If you grew up in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, you had a grandmother or an aunt or a mother or father that told you you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Most of us grew up thinking that. So in the 1980s, we listened to our teachers. And back then, they weren't like they are now. It was fairly according to curriculum. But if you got really lucky, you got that Jewish person that had relatives that survived the Holocaust, or you had black people that had actually talked back in the 1980s to ex-slaves or someone who was the daughter of a slave, who knew that thing. They didn't speak on it by reading books. They spoke on it by speaking to the people that lived the experience. And then the descendants of some of those people, especially black people and Jewish people, decided at a time in the history of this nation, after the Holocaust, slavery, Jim Crow, and the post-Reconstruction era, to redefine themselves as American in such a way that it gave permission to oppress other people because you survived oppression yourself. The first example of what I'm talking about came after the Indian Wars, when freed black Americans joined for the purpose of being used, just like now, the Buffalo Soldiers. And they went out and systematically, for the United States government, killed Native American people en masse. And then, because that was tolerated the same way and not brought to the attention of black people, that you just massacred another people after you have been massacred, throughout history, generation after generation after generation, just like the Confederate Army, these people were lauded as heroes. This is the black lost cause. Native American annihilation and the killing of the buffalo for sport, not to eat its meat or use its body for shelter or clothing or anything else, but to eliminate the food source of indigenous people in the United States. That's the black legacy I see. Right along with the Tuskegee Airmen and the colored troops and all of that. But in order for America to understand its original sin, black people have to understand that their genocide against Native Americans, once they were accepted in white society, is the exact same thing that is happening with Jews in Gaza. You see the parallels here? When you are an oppressed people, you tend to oppress. Now you've made it, so to speak. So as long as it's not happening to me, I'm going to help the guy that freed me to do this. In the case of Israel against the Palestinians, the United States, after World War II, granted these people pretty much asylum in the United States of America. But just like every other non-Christian, white, Anglo-Saxon, they didn't want all of them here. Just like they didn't want all these black people here, but they bred them so they couldn't stop that. So let's go back over here. So the solution, years after slavery was abolished, and you still had Jim Crow in America, was to go over here and rescue these people because they were closer to white than anyone else. And then since then, we have been fully beholden to them. Now we get to the 70s and 80s, when I remember being taught as a person of color that Israel could do no wrong. And all the while, this is a systematic brainwashing. My father is sitting there going, these people are defending themselves with rocks. Talking about the Palestinians. And when you're that age, you're not into politics. You don't give a shit. But now I do. Little Johnny come lately. And that's my burden to bear. That's the albatross on my shoulder that I didn't pay attention. Remember, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So then we get told this thing over and over again, and people start just running off at the mouth, repeating things, because it's more convenient to say the same thing over and over and over and over again than to crack open a book and prove them wrong. Unfortunately, for America in 2026, there are so many people who are more turned on by enlightenment and learning than there are people willing to just sit there and latch on to something. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and pretend. Like shows like Morning Joe and people like Pac-Man do not appeal to a certain audience. But that's a dumb audience. All they have is mouth. They don't have any ears. And you know what's more encouraging to me? That's all they do. That's all MAGA does. That's all anybody who has been anything except for January 6th insurrectionist terrorists. These people have absolutely no ability to rise up out of their seat and put their money where their mouth is. And I don't mean put their money where their mouth is with lawyers and suing, verbal intimidation and propaganda. I mean bleed. Like our ancestors did. For what you are about to lose. Not a one of them. Most of them haven't even worked a job. And you're sitting in your chair listening to me talk about this. The sad part is 10 years later, after that first threat was made, the thing we celebrated on January 4th, 2026, taxation without representation, is what brought along the American Revolution. And it didn't take too long, but you're still in your chair. Clickbaiting, doom scrolling, whining, doing the next thing that Donald Trump did. Or who's going to win this, or who's going to do that. Even though there are people broadcasting what they are doing, they are also on the street. But you're not. Our elected officials are not. Now I'm going to say once again, like and subscribe to this podcast and others like mine. I make $0 doing this, not a dime. But I'm going to tell you something very important right now. Here comes the cold water. You cannot trust your government. Ask any Indian. Have you learned nothing? If you were not one of the original settlers of this nation that stole it from Native Americans, what makes you think that you are not being used? You know how I can prove that? Through multitudes of generations. White people and their descendants and those who came after them have managed to convince not only Jews, Italians, and every other demographic that has come to this nation that black people are the enemy. They have been able to convince black people that black people are the enemy. Check Clarence Thomas, Hakeem Jeffries, Cory Booker, and every Jew and Italian right now in the United States Senate, not only Republicans, but Democrats also. And I'm talking about Democrats, centrist, hardcore milquetoast. I'm not talking about people that were newly elected or anything like that, or socialists. I'm saying these people are convinced that their self-preservation depends upon white Aryan America and its ideals. And these Jews and Italians and Puerto Ricans and Cubans that came here after they witnessed black people fighting in World War II and Vietnam come back to the same exact circumstances that they fought against overseas. But they learn nothing from it. They hear the stories about sexual and physical abuse in Indian schools, but they don't believe that. They don't believe us. They believe their white masters. And those Italians and those Jews that are now here, elevated to Congress and Senate and the Supreme Court, and even local municipalities, think they are a part of the club. Now, one thing black people know is you're not part of the club. You are for now, until you are of no further use. So I don't have time for people like Joe Scarborough and James Carville, because they were done for when their ancestors landed here. They mean absolutely nothing to me, and they're always going to go to the other side. And another thing a Native American elder told me is, when it comes right down to it, you might have white friends, but when they have to pick sides, they're going to pick their side, and they do. And the thing that is the most disgusting is descendants of enslaved people like Wes Moore going to the white side. But I am not discouraged, because the funny thing is, this is not 1963. It is not 1943, and it is not 1933. For every one black sellout, there are 10 or 15,000 white people who understand where we are at, having no obligation to be on our side because they don't look like us. They still do it. And your pathetic fucking ass is still taking AIPAC money. Jews saying that J Street isn't AIPAC. So look up J Street. Google it. The receipts are there. It's right there. Zionists. Now here is where I'm going to make my prediction. No matter what people say about us, I agree with AOC when she laughed. When you lose, when you're a loser, you just throw out any fucking thing you can, so now they're calling everybody communist, and it's the new Red Scare. Joe Scarborough was never like me. He was never in my club. I didn't want that motherfucker there. I don't care if he has a channel and people listen to him every day. I don't give two shits, because I know on the ground a difference is being made. Not because we're spitting the same rhetoric or we're peacefully protesting. It isn't because of any of that. None of that on its base is going to matter. What is going to matter is righteous anger executed in such a way that cannot be mistaken for anything other than you need to flee and get the fuck out of here. This is no longer your country. And the other thing is a collective soul and consciousness about what it means to give to your country. The people that are deciding your life right now in the United States of America have given absolutely nothing. They got elected to offices, and then they joined that same communism they accuse you of. That same capitalism that does not allow for free speech and only the accumulation of wealth. And I have a problem with socialists talking about the redistribution of wealth. There's no redistribution. The American worker created that wealth, not a corporation, not a party, not a company, not a country. Things are not produced when people don't work. Governments cannot exist when taxes are not paid. Now, there was a suggestion made by someone today that if we engage in some sort of blue state escrow of federal taxes, then we can stop Donald Trump, MAGA, the Republican Party, and the Supreme Court from taxing us without releasing our share of the Doged funds and monies withheld for certain programs. Now, I talked to you back in 2025 when all this shit started, when Doge was ripping and roaring, and I think it was Maxwell Frost that made a statement. They're stealing our money. And they said, no, they're not stealing our money. We can't prove it. Yeah, now, he did that. Maxwell Frost said on a program, one of the first people to say that Doge was stealing our money. Now, I live in a blue state, and we find out that money has already been allocated to red states. We pay taxes. We pay more taxes than red states. And he gave all our money to them. We get nothing. And in January 2027, millions of black and brown people are going to file a tax return to a defunct and inefficient IRS that has been gutted by Doge. Why the fuck are you doing that? That's fucking dumb. And escrow is dumb. When the American Revolution was fought on no taxation without representation. But I digress. I'm going to get to the meat of the matter. Here is where I think this thing is going to absolutely blow the fuck up. And it is not being talked about right now. Definitely. Mainstream media on cable and the networks are not talking about this at all because they don't want you to know it. People on TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube are not talking about it because it's not breaking news and the last dumb thing that Donald Trump did. This is what you need to understand. The next phrase I am about to say is going to change, alter, manipulate, and end the life of every single American that does not comply with Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. And the phrase is NDAA Section 219. This just passed in the House of Representatives. Now, for all you veterans out there who fought in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and in the Middle East, and are still serving, members of the IDF on your tax dollars already have better veterans benefits, free college, and free housing, and you don't. Let that sink in. When was the last time you went to the VA, and what was the outcome? How many homeless, disabled veterans do you know? Did you miss the memo? My brother-in-law didn't. On mental health benefits being cut on veterans. So NDAA Section 2019 will merge the United States military with that of Israel, the IDF. They will have access to every single thing you know and have, including your veterans' benefits. Information on every American. That's what a merge is. So if you had a relative that fought in Vietnam, a grandfather that fought in World War II against fascism, welcome to the United fucking States of America. If this isn't enough for you to stop, listen, put one foot in front of the other and end this shit, I don't know what is. This is absolute lawlessness. So I don't want to hear another motherfucking thing about an organized, peaceful protest. What I want to hear about is a new parliament. What I want to hear about is more midterms being won. What I want to hear about is not about the valor of the past, but the bravery of now. I don't want to sit here 30 years from now and remember 30 or 40,000 people gunned down in the streets of America, graveyards full of bodies, and monuments to concentration camps. I don't want to hear about unprepared citizens that allowed small groups of people to be bombed on American soil by the IDF because greedy billionaire motherfuckers sacrificed us for $1. And don't be fooled. When all this goes down, they're not going to sit here in America. That's why they're looking at bunkers and places all over the world. That's why they're setting up hotels. They don't intend to stay here to dominate you after the shit blows up. They intend to leave you here to deal with the carnage. No money, no resources, no gas, no lights, no nothing. They have already taken everything away from you that keeps you dignified as an American. Hell, overseas, they've even taken away your honor and your dignity. What more do they need to take? I have the answer to that too. Everything. Because we have become so coddled and disillusioned in this so-called American dream and American greatness that we cannot wake up. This is our downfall, and you're watching it happen. And it's not going to get any better. And no podcaster that fixes your mood for 5 minutes is going to make it better either. The only thing that is going to make it better is for real heroes to understand that freedom cannot wait. Every people of color that did this before waited. They were told to wait. And every American, real true American, not these people trying to still keep their paychecks coming in, everybody that's already lost everything, they're still waiting. For what? You are the hero. Now you can choose to rise to the occasion or not. It doesn't matter to some of us because we know where we are. But it'll matter to you when your spot in this clusterfuck is not chosen as ground zero for the fight. So if you want to be considered as part of the front, I strongly suggest you get a dog in the fucking game. This is the Woke Socialist Podcast. Have the country you deserve.